Part 1. The Sphinx that refused to blink. A sleepy stroll through 4,500 years of sand, stone, and speculation. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we begin with a shape that doesn't move, doesn't talk, and probably hasn't cared about anything for around 45 centuries. So yeah, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe sip something warm, because we're heading straight into the Egyptian desert, where the wind hums softly across the dunes, and a massive limestone cat-human hybrid just stares at nothing. Welcome to the story of the Great Sphinx of Giza, possibly the oldest celebrity in human history. And yes, he's been through everything. Vanity projects, nose jobs gone wrong, fan theories, Napoleon's alleged target practice, and centuries of people arguing about what he even is. Because, of course, when something's been sitting in the sand for thousands of years, humans simply have to overcomplicate it. So let's float gently into the haze of ancient Egypt. The sun is setting, the desert is whispering, and somewhere in the distance you can almost hear a modern tourist saying, "Wait, so who built this thing again?" A monument without a memory. Now here's the first mystery. No one actually knows who built the Sphinx, which is both fascinating and deeply annoying to archaeologists. You'd think that someone who carved a 240-foot-long statue of a lion with a human head would at least scribble their name somewhere. But nope, nothing. No Pharaoh was here, no commissioned by Khufu, sponsored by papyrus.com, just silence. Most Egyptologists point their dusty fingers towards Pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BCE. Khafre, the son of Khufu, the same Khufu who built the Great Pyramid right next door, because apparently one world wonder per family just wasn't enough. The logic goes like this. Khafre had a pyramid complex nearby. The Sphinx's face vaguely resembles him, if you squint and ignore that half of it's eroded, and there are remnants of a temple aligned with his mortuary structures. So, probably Khafre. But then again, some scholars argue that it might predate him entirely, like thousands of years earlier, which means the Sphinx could be older than the pyramids themselves. And that idea drives historians into mild academic hysteria. Of course, the ancient Egyptians didn't exactly leave behind a Meet the Sphinx plaque, so everyone's been playing archaeological guesswork ever since. The body of a lion, the face of a man. Or maybe the other way around. Let's talk about appearances. The Sphinx, as it stands or reclines today, looks like a lion's body with a human head, which is kind of a power move if you think about it. I'm part king of the beasts, part actual king, and 100% sandstone. But back in the day, it looked a lot fancier. Imagine vibrant colors, reds, yellows, blues, because yes, ancient monuments weren't the dull beige we see now. The Sphinx's face was painted reddish-brown, its headdress bright blue and yellow, the body probably golden. It must have looked like a cosmic guardian blazing under the desert sun. Now it's, well, kind of a sand-colored blob. And then there's the famous missing nose. You've heard the legend. Napoleon's soldiers used it for target practice. But that's almost certainly not true. Old sketches from before Napoleon's time already show the Sphinx noseless, which means someone else got there first. Whoever it was, they apparently looked up at one of the most iconic statues in history and thought, needs less nose. There's also a missing beard. Well, fragmented beard. Bits of it were found and are now in the British Museum because of course they are. The British Museum, a place where World Heritage goes to live out early retirement. The Sphinx's personality, if it had one. If we could psychoanalyze the Sphinx, and honestly someone probably has, it would be that strong, silent type, mysterious, stoic, slightly smug, but also maybe just really tired. Imagine sitting in one place for 4,500 years, half buried in sand, while generations of humans come and go, building empires, arguing about your nose, and inventing conspiracy theories on YouTube. The Sphinx has survived floods, sandstorms, religious iconoclasm, British archaeologists with shovels, and selfie sticks. And through it all, it just keeps staring east, at nothing in particular. There's something almost comical about it. This huge, proud monument, built to symbolize divine power, just perpetually covered in sand, like it's trying to take a very long nap. The cult of the Sphinx. You'd think a big lion man statue would just be a decoration, right? Nope. The Egyptians turned it into a full-blown religious site. In front of it, archaeologists found what's called the Sphinx Temple, an area of offering halls and altars where priests probably came to perform rituals for the rising sun god. Later on, during the New Kingdom, about 1,000 years after it was built, Pharaoh Thutmose IV had a weird dream. In this dream, the Sphinx spoke to him. Yes, the actual statue. Apparently, it complained about being buried in sand and promised Thutmose that if he cleaned it up, he'd become king. Thutmose, who was not the first in line for the throne, did exactly that. He ordered the Sphinx to be excavated and restored. Then he became pharaoh. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe ancient Egypt was really into mystical job interviews. To commemorate this divine promotion, he carved the dream stele, a big granite slab placed between the Sphinx's paws. It tells the story of his vision, though the text has eroded quite a bit. But you can still read parts of it, and it's basically an ancient thanks for the promotion plaque to a talking statue. Buried, dug up, buried again. One of the more tragicomic details about the Sphinx's life, if we can call it that, is that it keeps getting buried in its own sand. It's like the desert keeps saying, "You know what? You've been showing off long enough." For most of history, the Sphinx was visible only from the neck up. Imagine being an early traveler to Giza, seeing just the head poking out of the dunes and thinking, "Cool statue." Meanwhile, the rest of the 240-foot-long body was sleeping under several meters of sand. It wasn't until the 20th century that the Sphinx was fully cleared again. Archaeologists worked painstakingly to free it, while locals probably wondered why foreigners were so obsessed with an oversized cat. And even now, the desert keeps creeping back. Every year, wind-blown sand piles up around its paws again. It's a slow, eternal tug-of-war between human effort and the patience of nature. Let's float forward a bit. As centuries passed, the Sphinx went through multiple identity crises. Greeks arrived and went, "Ah yes, the Sphinx," borrowing the name from their own myth, a riddle-loving monster with wings and an attitude problem. Later cultures saw it as everything from a fallen idol to a portal to secret chambers. In the Middle Ages, some Islamic scholars thought it represented ancient kings, while others saw it as a warning from vanished civilizations. Then, in the 19th century, Europeans turned it into an archaeological obsession. They measured, photographed, and theorized about it to death. And yet, for all that effort, no one's ever found a single tomb or hidden room beneath it, despite what half the Discovery Channel seems to suggest. Because if there's one thing history loves, it's a mystery that refuses to give a straight answer. And the Sphinx might be the greatest of them all.
Part 2. The Sphinx, rediscovered again and again. Sand, scholars, and a few terrible restoration ideas. Hey again. Welcome back to the desert. Still quiet, still endless, still full of sand that gets everywhere. If you've settled deeper under your blanket since part 1, perfect, because we're staying right here, with the Sphinx, our unbothered, half-buried roommate of eternity. When we left off, the Great Sphinx of Giza had already spent thousands of years sitting stoically through dust storms, dynastic collapses, and the rise and fall of about every empire you can name. Now it's time to talk about how the world rediscovered him, again and again and again. Because apparently humans have the memory span of a goldfish when it comes to sand-covered monuments. Napoleon's visit. The Great Sphinx meets the Enlightenment. Let's drift to 1798. The French are invading Egypt, not because they needed more sand, but because Napoleon Bonaparte decided it would be a great way to annoy the British. And in his infinite charisma, he brought along something very on brand for the Enlightenment era. A small army of nerds. These were the savants, scientists, artists, engineers, and historians tasked with documenting everything ancient and mysterious in Egypt. While Napoleon was busy losing naval battles, his scholars were geeking out in the desert, sketching hieroglyphs and measuring statues. When they came across the Sphinx, they were awestruck. It was still mostly buried, only the head and shoulders visible. But that was enough. They called it Le Grand Sphinx, took dozens of drawings, and included it in their monumental publication, Description de l'Égypte. Suddenly, Europe was obsessed. The Sphinx became a symbol of ancient mystery, divine silence, and exotic wisdom. Or, as most 19th century poets would put it, a really cool rock that doesn't talk back. And yes, this is where the rumor started that Napoleon's troops shot off its nose. It's a nice story. Dramatic, cinematic, full of French cannons, but no. Paintings from before his campaign already show the Sphinx looking like it had a bad rhinoplasty centuries earlier. In reality, the nose probably broke off due to erosion or deliberate defacement much earlier, possibly during a medieval religious purge against idolatrous figures, because nothing says devotion than vandalizing a 4,000-year-old wonder. The Victorian obsession, digging, guessing, and posing dramatically. Fast forward to the 1800s, the golden age of archaeology, or, depending on your view, the golden age of very confident people with shovels and mustaches. The Sphinx was rediscovered again, this time by European explorers who decided it was time to liberate the poor thing from its sandy grave. One of the early enthusiasts was Giovanni Battista Caviglia, an Italian sea captain turned amateur archaeologist. In 1817, he led a major excavation, digging out part of the Sphinx's chest and paws. He found the dream stela of Thutmose IV. You know, the "I had a dream, now I'm king" tablet we mentioned earlier. Caviglia was convinced that the Sphinx hid a secret chamber, because of course he was. Sadly for him, and fortunately for structural integrity, he found nothing but sand and disappointment. Over the next few decades, a parade of adventurers followed, each with their own theories. Some claimed it was a temple to the sun, others thought it was hollow, and one or two insisted it was the work of aliens. Yes, even in the 19th century, the alien thing had started creeping in. Apparently humans have always had a hard time believing other humans could build big things without extraterrestrial help. By the mid-1800s, the Sphinx was practically a tourist attraction. British officers took photos leaning against it, women in corsets posed dramatically in front of it, and someone even suggested putting a cafe nearby, because nothing says respecting ancient history than serving tea on a 4,000-year-old lion. But the Sphinx had its own opinion on being uncovered. It didn't like it. The desert, with the patience of a cat covering up its own mess, began burying it again. Within a few years, the paws and most of the body were swallowed by the dunes. It was almost as if the Sphinx sighed and said, "That's enough human nonsense for now," before tucking itself back into bed. And so, the cycle continued. Dig, discover, photograph, forget, repeat. Each time, the Sphinx would reappear briefly, bask in attention, and then quietly vanish under waves of sand again. Honestly, it's kind of relatable. The 20th century. Archaeology grows up, or sort of. By the early 1900s, Egyptology was becoming a real science. Gone were the treasure hunters with monocles, well, mostly gone, and in came the methodical archaeologists with notebooks, measuring tools, and an almost romantic obsession with preservation. Enter Émile Baraise, a French engineer, and one of the first to attempt a full excavation. Between 1925 and 1936, Baraise led a massive project to free the Sphinx from centuries of accumulated sand. It was a slow, careful process, though careful in 1930s archaeology still involved quite a lot of picks and wheelbarrows. By the time he finished, the Sphinx stood fully visible for the first time in millennia. The world was stunned. Photographs of the newly revealed monument circulated everywhere, from academic journals to travel posters. The Great Sphinx was reborn, its elongated body stretching majestically beside the pyramids like a fossilized dream come back to life. But with visibility came vulnerability. Once exposed, the Sphinx began eroding faster. The soft limestone of its body started flaking and crumbling under the harsh desert climate. In trying to save it, we'd accidentally put it in danger again. Restoration attempts, when good intentions go very wrong. You might assume that by now experts had learned how to preserve ancient monuments. They had not. Throughout the mid-20th century, various well-meaning Egyptian and foreign teams tried to fix the Sphinx. They patched cracks with cement, they reinforced eroding layers with modern concrete, and in some cases they just poured more limestone over the old stone, like frosting a 4,000-year-old cake. It didn't go well. The modern materials trapped moisture inside, accelerating the decay. Basically, the Sphinx was given a bad makeover that made its wrinkles worse. By the 1980s, it was literally falling apart in places. Chunks of stone flaked off its neck and chest. There were whispers, slightly overdramatic ones, that the Sphinx might collapse entirely. In response, Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities launched a more serious preservation effort. They removed the old cement, studied the rock composition, and used less invasive methods. For once, the Sphinx got a restoration worthy of its age, and a team that didn't treat it like a DIY project. Pseudo-archaeology and the cult of hidden secrets. While real archaeologists were busy trying to stop it from dissolving, the Sphinx was having a second career as a conspiracy magnet. In the 1970s and 1980s, a new generation of alternative historians decided that the official story was too boring. Some claimed it was 12,000 years old, built by an advanced lost civilization before Egypt even existed. Others argued that it was aligned with the stars of Leo and encoded ancient astronomical prophecies. One particularly enthusiastic theory suggested there were secret chambers under the Sphinx containing the Hall of Records left by Atlantis. Because, of course, there's always Atlantis. Even respected names got involved. In the 1990s, researchers like Robert Schoch argued that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx's body were caused by rain, not sand, meaning it must predate the desert environment by thousands of years. Mainstream Egyptologists collectively sighed. The debate still pops up now and then, half science, half sci-fi, all very sleepy if you listen to it long enough. And through it all, the Sphinx just sits there, refusing to comment. The Sphinx today, guardian of tourists and TikToks. Nowadays, the Great Sphinx of Giza lives a surprisingly noisy life. It's surrounded by tourists, selfie sticks, and camera drones. It watches over bus tours, camel rides, and the occasional influencer doing yoga in front of it. But even with all that chaos, it remains weirdly peaceful. The ancient stillness is there, buried under the sound of camera shutters. You can stand beside it, close your eyes, and almost feel the same desert wind that brushed its face 4,500 years ago. It survived sandstorms, invasions, and centuries of human theories. And it'll probably outlast us too. Quietly waving, quietly watching, quietly eroding, but still there. Because the Sphinx doesn't need to do anything. It just exists, an ancient punctuation mark in the sentence of human history. And that's kind of beautiful in its own indifferent way.
Part 3.
The Sphinx and the Human Imagination. From pharaohs to Freud, everyone's favorite silent therapist. Hey again. If you're still awake, impressive. If not, let's find two. The Sphinx would probably approve. After all, it spent several millennia perfecting the art of not reacting to anything. Tonight, we're floating through the foggier side of its story. How this lump of carved limestone turned into one of the most over-interpreted symbols in human history. Because apparently, when something refuses to speak, people start giving it a lot to say. The Sphinx in ancient Egypt, power, divinity, and that "don't mess with me" energy. In the beginning, well, the Egyptian version of the beginning, the Sphinx wasn't mysterious at all. It was royal propaganda. A monument shouting, silently, of course, "Behold the divine strength of the Pharaoh, half man, half lion, all power." The ancient Egyptians believed that kings weren't just humans, they were living gods. And lions, as apex predators of the Nile Valley, symbolized solar power, protection, and raw dominance. Combine the two, and you get the ultimate divine bouncer of eternity. To them, the Sphinx wasn't a riddle. It was a guardian, a cosmic watchdog sitting at the edge of the Giza necropolis, watching over the royal tombs as if to say, "Yeah, you can try disturbing the pharaoh's rest, but maybe don't." It represented Ra-Harakti, the sun god in his horizon aspect. Literally, the rising sun emerging between two mountains. So when the Sphinx looked east, it wasn't just staring into the desert, it was greeting the dawn, day after day, forever. A job description that sounds poetic, but probably very boring after a few millennia. The Greek hijack, when mythology gets confused. Fast forward about 2,000 years. The Greeks arrive in Egypt and, being Greeks, decide to interpret everything through their own mythology. They took one look at this half-human, half-lion statue and said, "Ah yes, the Sphinx, we know her." Except they didn't. In Greek mythology, the Sphinx was female, a winged monster with the body of a lion, the head of a woman, and a personality that could best be described as toxic. She sat outside the city of Thebes, asking travelers a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 in the evening? The answer, of course, was a human, because babies crawl, adults walk upright, and the elderly use a cane. Tragically, there was no prize for getting it right, except not dying. So the Greeks basically borrowed the Egyptian name and slapped it onto a completely different creature. It's like seeing a lion statue in London and deciding it must represent a werewolf from local folklore. From then on, the Sphinx became a kind of mythological mashup, part Egyptian guardian, part Greek monster, part philosophical meme. Rome and beyond. The Sphinx goes on tour. The Romans, never ones to miss a branding opportunity, carried the Sphinx motif across their empire. They built miniature versions, painted them on walls, and used them as fancy furniture decorations. By then, no one really remembered what the original meant. They just liked the vibe. During the Middle Ages, Europeans rediscovered the Sphinx through dusty travelers' tales and half-baked Bible allegories. They didn't know what to make of it. Some said it symbolized Satan, half angel, half beast. Others said it symbolized forbidden knowledge or the arrogance of pagan kings. Basically, everyone projected their own anxieties onto it. The Sphinx became a Rorschach test made of stone. And that's sort of how it stayed. Always interpreted, never understood. The Renaissance. The Sphinx becomes an aesthetic accessory. By the time the Renaissance really hit full swing, ancient Egypt had turned into Europe's favorite mystery box. Scholars, alchemists, and artists were obsessed with hieroglyphics, believing they contained secret cosmic wisdom. The Sphinx, of course, became the unofficial logo of this obsession. You could find it carved into palace gardens, printed in occult books, and sitting smugly on architectural facades from Florence to Prague. To Renaissance thinkers, the Sphinx symbolized hidden knowledge, because it looked like it was guarding a secret. Never mind that the only thing it's actually guarded is sand. Artists painted it with human eyes full of melancholy. Philosophers wrote about it as a metaphor for mystery, and occultists used it as shorthand for things we don't understand but sound cool saying. The Egyptian original was long forgotten. What remained was the idea of the Sphinx, timeless, unreadable, and slightly judgmental. The 19th century. Freud enters the chat. Now let's quietly tiptoe into the modern age, the 1800s and early 1900s, when psychology was inventing itself, and everything symbolic got a brand new meaning. Enter Sigmund Freud, the man who could look at anything and say, "This reminds me of your mother." Freud loved the Sphinx. To him, it represented the enigma of the human subconscious. The statue's unreadable expression mirrored the repressed mysteries of the mind. In other words, the Sphinx became the original therapist, silent, inscrutable, and vaguely judgmental while you talk about your problems. He even compared the Sphinx to dreams, both ancient, cryptic, and open to wildly speculative interpretation. So in a way, psychology rebranded the Sphinx from guardian of tombs to guardian of trauma. Later thinkers took it further. The Sphinx became the eternal questioner, the eternal riddle. What is man? What is life? Why is there sand in everything? The Sphinx in art. A mood, not a monument. By the time the 19th century hit full swing, the Sphinx wasn't just a symbol, it was a mood. Artists like Jean-Léon Gérôme and Gustave Moreau painted it into moody desert scenes and allegorical fantasies. Sometimes it appeared as a beautiful woman gazing over dead travelers. Femme fatale meets geological feature. Other times, it was the ancient ruin bathed in sunset, embodying the melancholy of lost civilizations. The Romantic poets loved it too. Shelley, Byron, and company used the Sphinx as shorthand for time, decay, and the futility of human ambition. By now, the Sphinx wasn't Egyptian anymore. It belonged to everyone and no one. It was a universal metaphor, carved in stone but reshaped by every culture that looked at it. The New Age era. Crystals, aliens, and Atlantis. If the 19th century gave the Sphinx poetry, the 20th century gave it chaos. Suddenly, everyone with a typewriter or a cable TV show had a theory. Some said it was built by survivors of Atlantis. Others said it encoded messages from extraterrestrials. There were even claims that its proportions matched the stars of Orion, and that it was part of a vast astrological calendar. The most imaginative version proposed that there was a secret chamber beneath it, containing the lost knowledge of humanity, or maybe just some dusty limestone. People used ground-penetrating radar, psychic visions, and very confident PowerPoint slides to prove it. Spoiler: no chamber has ever been found. But the theories keep coming because the Sphinx's greatest power is its ability to make humans project whatever they want onto it. A blank stare is the ultimate invitation for overthinking. The Sphinx in pop culture. From mummies to memes. Of course, the Sphinx eventually made the leap from dusty academia to Hollywood glamour. It's been blown up, resurrected, and half-destroyed in more movies than any other monument on Earth. You've seen it in The Mummy.
Part 4. The Sphinx Today. Sand, Science, and the Quiet Patience of Stone. Hey again. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've now spent more time thinking about the Sphinx than most pharaohs did. So let's dim the lights one last time, take a deep breath, and drift to the present day. The Great Sphinx still lies there in the Giza Plateau, half guarding, half snoozing, while the modern world hums restlessly around it. Cars honk in Cairo, tourists queue for selfies, drones buzz overhead, and through it all, the Sphinx just doesn't care. It has seen everything. Empires rise, gods fall, civilizations turn to dust, and yet it's still here, still facing the sunrise, still refusing to blink. Let's float gently into its modern life, its scientific secrets, the battle to preserve it, and the strange comfort it offers a world that keeps changing faster than the desert wind. A monument under a microscope. For the past century, scientists and archaeologists have studied the Sphinx with the same fascination people once reserved for divine oracles. Every crack, every grain of limestone, every uneven contour of its face has been scanned, measured, and analyzed to exhaustion. We now know that the Sphinx was carved from a single limestone ridge left behind when quarrying stone for the Great Pyramid. The builders, probably the workers of Pharaoh Khafre, chose the outcrop because it had layers of both soft and hard stone. The hard layers form the head and upper body, while the softer, more crumbly limestone mix up the lower section, the reason the body has eroded so much more dramatically than the face. If you look closely, the Sphinx isn't symmetrical. One side of the face droops slightly more than the other, the body leans subtly forward, and the paws aren't perfectly aligned. For all its grandeur, it's surprisingly human in its imperfections, like the ancient masons ran out of patience halfway through but figured no one's going to notice in 4,000 years anyway. And they were mostly right. The erosion debate. Water, wind, or time itself. Now, let's tiptoe into an archaeology's most polite but persistent argument. What exactly caused the Sphinx's deep grooves and weathered flanks? The mainstream answer is simple: wind and sand erosion. After thousands of years of exposure, the desert carved delicate ripples and furrows across the limestone, like slow-motion waves. But a few voices, like geologist Robert Schoch, have suggested something wilder, that the erosion was caused primarily by rainfall, meaning it must date back to a wetter, prehistoric era, maybe 7,000 or even 10,000 BCE. That would make the Sphinx twice as old as the accepted timeline and possibly built before recorded civilization. It's a tempting idea, ancient wisdom, lost builders, hidden epics, but there's no solid proof. Egyptologists remain firmly grounded in the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BCE, when Khafre reigned. And really, that's ancient enough. You don't need Atlantis to make something impressive. Still, the argument lingers like desert heat, because when something refuses to explain itself, people will always fill the silence with their own theories. The anatomy of decay. Let's get real for a second. The Sphinx is in trouble. Not traumatically so, not crumbling into dust trouble, but quietly, inevitably deteriorating, as all old things do. Its limestone body absorbs moisture from the air and the rising groundwater below. Pollution from nearby Cairo mixes with humidity to form a faint acid mist that eats into the stone. Add temperature swings, sand abrasion, and vibrations from constant tourism, and you get a monument that's aging faster than anyone wants to admit. Egyptian conservators have been fighting this slow-motion collapse for decades. They've injected cracks with resins, added drainage systems beneath the plateau, and carefully removed damaging layers of old cement from previous repairs. Some of the blocks at the base of the Sphinx aren't original at all. They're modern limestone facings added to support weakened areas. It's a patchwork of past and present now, a 4,500-year-old body with 20th century prosthetics. But somehow the soul of it remains untouched. Even under the scaffolding, even through layers of chemical consolidation, the Sphinx still feels ancient in a way no modern monument ever could. The Guardians of the Guardian. Today, the Sphinx is protected by the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities and guarded around the clock. Visitors can no longer climb it, thankfully, or picnic on its paws like they did in 19th century photos. Access is limited to guided tours, and parts of the surrounding area are restricted for preservation. It also benefits from digital archaeology, laser scanning, 3D mapping, and ground-penetrating radar. Every millimeter of its surface has been recorded in exquisite detail, creating a digital backup in case the physical one doesn't survive forever. So yes, the Sphinx now has a 3D model, probably more accurate than its real self. Somewhere in a server room, a virtual Sphinx is waiting, patiently, as unblinking as its limestone twin. The Sphinx at night. There's something magical, quietly, almost eerily magical about the Sphinx after dark. When the tourist buses leave, the sound and light show ends, and the desert breeze returns, it becomes what it's always been, alone. The lights of Cairo shimmer on the horizon, a reminder that time hasn't stopped. But the Sphinx bathed in moonlight doesn't seem to belong to this world anymore. It's a survivor from another reality, a piece of eternity that accidentally ended up on Earth. Egyptian guards sometimes say that the plateau feels alive at night, that the air hums softly between the pyramids and the Sphinx. It's not mystical, it's just history whispering through limestone pores. 4,000 years of human dreams echo there. You can almost imagine the ancient priests lighting incense before it, murmuring hymns to the sun god, the scent carried upward through the same desert wind that now brings dust from car tires and exhaust fumes. Different prayers, same air. A global icon with no words. The Great Sphinx is now everywhere. Postcards, documentaries, history textbooks, refrigerator magnets. Its face, eroded but eternal, is printed on everything from postage stamps to chocolate wrappers. And yet, despite all that exposure, we still don't really know it. It doesn't have a clear origin story. It doesn't have inscriptions or blueprints, or even a definite name. It simply exists, older than most gods, quieter than all of them. That silence is maybe its greatest trick, because silence can't be disproven. It lets us fill in the blanks however we like. For scientists, it's an engineering marvel. For poets, a metaphor for eternity. For tourists, a backdrop. For dreamers, a doorway. And for the Sphinx itself, probably none of those things. It just keeps doing what it's always done, staring east, waiting for a sun that never fails to rise. The Sphinx and Time. There's a story, perhaps apocryphal, that an archaeologist once asked an Egyptian worker what he thought of the Sphinx. The man smiled and said, "It was old when God was young." And really, that's how it feels. The Sphinx isn't just old, it's beyond time. It doesn't measure centuries the way we do, it measures eras. Each sandstorm is a heartbeat, each sunrise a blink. It reminds us quietly that permanence is an illusion. Even stone erodes, even gods are forgotten, and even the loudest civilizations fade into whispers. But there's beauty in that too. The Sphinx is proof that survival doesn't require motion or sound or even clarity. Sometimes endurance is enough. A final look. So, what have we learned from our slow drift through 4,500 years of sand and speculation? Not much, really, and that's the point. The Great Sphinx of Giza isn't meant to be solved. It was built to endure, not to explain. Its mystery isn't a riddle to answer. It's a rhythm to listen to. A calm reminder that the world has been ancient far longer than we've been anxious. So the next time you see a picture of it, stoic, half eroded, sunlight sliding down its face, try not to ask why. Just let it be what it is, the world's oldest blank stare. Unmoved, unimpressed, and somehow still magnificent.